All right, we're going to get going on our next tax increment financing study and formulating committee meeting. This is our third meeting. We're down a couple of our members today who had scheduled out-of-town travel, and we decided to go forward. This is on the YouTube channel, and so I'm sure they'll watch it and catch up. The start of the agenda is the minutes of the November 20 meeting, which have been in the folder online, and I know that link got circulated earlier. If nobody has questions about those, I would entertain a motion. All right, we got a motion and second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? All right, we adopt the minutes. Next on the agenda, we had set the agenda last time and divvied up assignments. And really, before I ask Richard to take the next item, maybe Brian, you can describe where all this stuff is on the internet for people who want to find it.
Sure. So as we reviewed last time, there is a committee page on the Nashville.gov website, which you can find from the Government tab. If you scroll down here, we have a public-facing SharePoint site at the link titled TIF Committee Document Library. If you open that up, you're going to see this folder here under the way I've organized it. Actually, I'll just back up so there are several folders down here where we are holding kind of the master set of documents, and then as we do each meeting, I'm creating a dated meeting folder up here, and then so for all the documents that will be discussed at each meeting, you'll find them in this dated folder. So today's the 7th. And you will see the meeting minutes from last time, the agenda, and the other documents that we'll be discussing today.
All right, thank you. And so we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is discussion of applicable state law. And Mr. Warren was going to discuss that with us.
All right. There is a memorandum that I prepared that's on the SharePoint site on the subject of Tennessee TIF statutes. There are, I think, 3 different statutes, and one of them has a couple of different parts. And I'll just kind of walk real quickly through the highlights of what are in those statutes. The one that we deal with the most often in Metro is the Housing Authorities Law, which is the statute under which MDHA operates. That statute gives housing authorities the power to create redevelopment plans, which is a defined term, pursuant to which the agency can undertake redevelopment projects in and around blighted areas. There's a definition of what constitutes a blighted area, and typically a study would be done to look at a particular area and note what causes it to be a blighted area. MDHA would then develop a redevelopment plan, which its board would approve, and then it would be submitted to the Metro Council for approval after a public hearing. The statute sets forth certain items that are required to be contained in the plan. These include indicating the relationship of the plan to define local objectives on land use and improve traffic, public transportation, public utilities, and so forth. You also would indicate the proposed land uses and building requirements in the area and address the temporary relocation of persons who are displaced by the redevelopment activity. Those are the required provisions for the plan. It is permissible to add other provisions that are not required with the statute. One that we almost always see is the presence of an architectural review committee who will review proposed new developments within the redevelopment area. That's not required by the statute, but I think it is reassuring to people who are investing significant sums of money that there will be some measure of control over what other types of development occurs within the district. The plan may include tax increment financing or TIF. I think virtually all of them do. There are certain additional requirements that are required to be met if TIF is going to be included. That includes an estimate of the cost of the redevelopment project, the sources of revenue to finance the cost of the project, including the estimated tax increment, an estimate of the amount and the final maturity of bonded or other indebtedness to be incurred, and finally, an estimate of the impact of tax increment financing provision on all taxing agencies in which the redevelopment project is to be located. The council establishes an amount of TIF for each district, and that can be done, that will be done when the plan is first approved, and it can subsequently be amended. I think most people understand how TIF is calculated. There is a base assessment, which is the assessment for the property in its current condition, and then assuming the property is going to be redeveloped, presumably it will generate a higher tax assessment. And the increment between that original base assessment and the new assessment is what we're talking about when we talk about a tax increment. There's a difference in how the increment is calculated for plans that were done prior to July 1, 2006. You look at the base assessment on the date that the redevelopment agency, in this case usually MDHA, acquired the property. And so sometimes the agency does acquire properties planning to redevelopment. Other times there may be a developer who already owns the property, and they would actually transfer the property to MDHA, which would transfer it back just to establish a date on which the increment is to be calculated. Since 2006, they just used the tax assessment from the most recent tax assessment rather than having to actually transfer the property in and out. And so it is the increment above that base assessment that is used to help finance the redevelopment. The statute authorizes loans to be made secured by a pledge of the TIF revenue for a specific period of time, which cannot extend beyond the expiration date of the applicable redevelopment plan. So if when a plan is initially adopted, it lasts for a period of 30 years, you could pledge the TIF increment for that 30-year period. If 10 years later there's only 20 years left in the district, then 20 years is the maximum term that can be used. One of the ways that the redevelopment agency may use the tax increment, they can acquire title to a parcel and then sell it to a developer and write down the cost of the land by selling it for a lower figure. They cannot pay more than market value for the property when they acquire it, but it is possible to use a very nominal value. The statute calls that the use value, but it's just a way to get some TIF money into a project. Because often these are projects that would be difficult to finance without the availability of the TIF money. The developer then acts as the redevelopment agency's agent to undertake certain activities or make improvements that are eligible, and that's a very important word, eligible for TIF expenditures. The statute sets forth the uses that are eligible. It would be possible for the local legislative body, in our case the Metro Council, to adopt a narrower list of eligible uses, but you cannot adopt a broader use than is set forth in the statute. And it's a fairly short list, so I'm just going to run through it. It includes the acquisition of blighted areas that you want to renovate. It includes acquiring real property where the condition of the title or the diverse ownership of the property be assembled, street or lot layouts or other conditions prevent a proper development of the property. So often you'll have little bitty parcels that are owned by many different owners, and it would be difficult to go in and try and develop anything on it. So you can assemble those properties and then sell them to a developer. Sometimes you've got streets that aren't in the place where you want them to be, and so streets can be relocated and things like that to make a good development parcel, because that's part of what makes some of these areas blighted is they're just in a condition where it's difficult to redevelopment as they currently stand. Site clearance and site preparation are also eligible expenses. That can include utilities, street construction and relocation. If there are environmental issues with the property, which is something we've seen in a number of properties, those can be remediated. That's something that can make a property too expensive to redevelop. You look at it and you say, well, this would be a great place to put a grocery store or an apartment building, but there's environmental issues that need to be cleaned up, and I can't make that pencil. I can't find money in my budget to clean up environmental issues. If it were a greenfield site, then I could come in and develop it. So the TIF money can be used to remediate environmental condition. The eligible uses include parks, public open spaces, public playgrounds, pedestrian ways, and parking garages. So you may say, well, I can afford to finance my building, but it sure would be nice to take some of this extra land we have here and have a little vest pocket park or something like that. That is an eligible use for TIF expenditures. You can also pay for architectural, engineering, planning, and legal expenses, but only to the extent that they relate to an eligible improvement. So you can't pay all of the architectural fees for the entire project, but you can pay if, for instance, one of the components is to build sidewalks and reconfigure streets and things like that. Those are eligible expenses, and you could include your architectural expenses that relate to those portions of the project. They added a provision that includes environmental, the Leadership in Energy Environmental Design, or LEED, as most people refer to it, and other similar statutes. Those sort of expenses are eligible expenses. And finally, construction period interest on TIF loans. And this may be as good a place as any to talk about. What you have is a potential stream of revenue in this incremental tax. And so you don't have any money, you just have a stream of revenue. And so it is typical to go to a lender and say, would you loan some money against this stream of revenue that's going to be coming in? And we've talked about perhaps getting a lender who makes those type of loans to come talk to us to give us a little more insight into how those loans are underwritten. It's a little bit of a challenge because there isn't an existing income stream. There will be one once the building is built and it's reassessed for taxes and this increment starts to come in. So the first question the underwriter is going to ask is, who is the sponsor for this project, and can I see their financial statement? Because I need somebody to sign a guarantee. So if this building never gets built, there's somebody who's going to pay back my loan. And so that's one requirement. It also is a little bit awkward. The money just comes in one time a year. And so you've got a period of time after the building gets built and it gets reassessed. And then it's almost a year later that the taxes get paid, and that's when the money comes in. So and some of the lenders want to be paid, interest quarterly or something like that. So that later can become an eligible expense to reimburse yourself for the interest on the TIF loan that you had to advance before the TIF revenue started. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm going through this pretty quickly, but I think it's important for us all to have kind of a common
I'm writing down my questions.
knowledge base. Okay, great. The concept of eligible expenses is the key factor in awarding of TIF. The statute is really agnostic as to what type of project gets done. We've done residential projects, we've done office buildings, we've done retail, we've done restaurants, we've done manufacturing, but the key is it has to be one of those eligible expenses that I talked about before: infrastructure, buying down the cost of the land, a parking garage, or something else. But and I gave some examples. The Bell South Tower is one example of an office building. The Caremark headquarters, the Eckerd drugstore over in Germantown was another one. The Church Street Center, which got developed and built and then torn down so we could put our new library where it used to be. Just didn't work downtown, but that had some TIF money in it. The Jubilee Restaurant was another example. Fluffo Mattress was a manufacturing facility. The Benny Dillon parking garage downtown were all projects that were done with TIF money. So it's got a wide variety of uses. And I know Joe Kane is here from MDHA and is going to talk to us specifically about some of the issues that they see. But Joe and I have talked about the fact a lot of times the hardest part of this is finding eligible expenses. You'll see a project that the developer says, I really need some help for this project to work. And you say, well, the only problem is we can only spend money on eligible expenses. And so if you've got parking associated with it, we can pay for that. If you're going to have to reconfigure a street or move the utilities or take the utilities underground, those are all expenses that are eligible, but you do have to find eligible expenses. There is the power of eminent domain within a redevelopment agency, sparingly used, but it is there. And that's kind of the basic statute. When we talk about TIF, we're usually talking about the kind of projects a redevelopment agency like MDHA undertakes. There are other types of TIF. We're going to talk about those in a minute, but that's the one that we think of most often when we talk about this. There is another portion of the same housing development statute that was added in 2017 that permits transit-oriented redevelopment plans. Some people call that TOD, transit-oriented development. Here's redevelopment. The legislature made a finding that there are areas in counties and municipalities that have a transit deficiency and lack adequate high-capacity transit options. So they gave various powers to housing authorities to address those concerns. There's a list of activities set forth in Part 703 of the statute. I'm not going to go through that in detail because it's very similar to the list of eligible uses that I went through on basic TIF, with one significant difference. It adds A4D, which permits the installing, constructing, or reconstructing of privately owned affordable housing or workforce housing, as those terms are defined in the Tennessee statutes. So what that does is that makes those expenses themselves eligible for use of the TIF money. you can't use that except for the so-called other eligible expenses if you're under an MDHA type TIF. But if you're under a TOD TIF, then that is considered to be an eligible expense. High capacity transit is another key term. That's defined as carrying more people or offering more frequent service than buses. A high-capacity transit facility is defined very broadly. It can include a right-of-way for the high-capacity transit. Sometimes they operate in designated lanes, things like that. It includes boarding stations, rail track, bridges, park and ride lots. And we use the phrase the transit deficient area. That's what it sounds like. It's just an area that needs additional transit. Again, it's very similar to TIF in that MDHA would have to develop a plan, and it again would have to be approved by the Metro Council after a public hearing. The statute specifically says that land may be made available at its use value, as we said before, so long as it's used to support the transit plan. So if you say we need a park and ride station here to make this transit program make sense, that is an appropriate, you could make the land available for that station as part of the TIF plan. This plan also permits a tax increment financing provision that permits the use of incremental taxes generated by properties within the boundaries of the transit-oriented redevelopment plan. All of these are very area specific, and so you'll have very specific boundaries. You'll say from Church Street to 4th Avenue to here, and you can look on a map and see where the area is, and that's the area in which this can take place. And again, that tax increment revenue can be used for a number of years after the effective date of the plan. And again, there's a list of things that have to be included in the plan. These include cost estimates, funding sources, and an estimate of the fiscal impact on all taxing agencies in the district to give up this increment. So that's basically transit-oriented development. The other significant type of TIF are ones that are done by industrial development corporations, which, since we have an industrial development board that implements that, we usually use that acronym IDB, and the IDB can also do TIF. In Davidson County, the only project I'm aware of they've done is the Bellevue project. Everything else has been done by MDHA as a redevelopment agency TIF. There are some significant differences between IDB TIFs and development agency TIFs. They're similar in that it begins with the adoption of an economic impact plan, which designates, again, a specific geographic area referred to as the economic impact area, with respect to which the IDB is entitled to receive the incremental property tax. The economic impact area must be located in the municipality that created the IDB, and this is what's very different from the development agency TIF, that the economic development area must include either an industrial park, which is defined in the statute, but I think we all know what that is, a big park with a lot of warehouses in it, or certain specific projects that are set forth in the statute. These include facilities for the manufacturing or assembling of products, warehousing and distribution, canals, ports, parking and railroads, office buildings, certain healthcare facilities and educational facilities, certain recreational facilities, theme or amusement parks, low or moderate income, elderly or handicapped multifamily housing, planetariums or museums, hotels and motels, although there are some restrictions on what can be done with that, pollution control, coal gasification, energy production, as well as buildings or improvements for farming, ranching, and agricultural activities. The plan is required to, again, identify the boundaries of the area subject to the plan, either identify which one of the projects on that list that I just went through or an industrial park is located within it, which is necessary for it to qualify. Discuss the expected benefits to the municipality from the development of the economic impact area, and then the TIF must be limited to 20 years unless you obtain separate approval from the comptroller and the Commissioner of Economic and Community Development. It is a little bit confusing when you read the statute. We're going to talk next about the Uniformity Act, which was a statute that was passed in 2012 that puts certain limits on TIF that overrides the statutes that specifically authorize it. And so I think if you read the IDB statute, I think it still has a longer term in it than the Uniformity Act permits, but the Uniformity Act limits those districts to 20 years. Let's go ahead and talk about the Uniformity Act. This is something that I think was driven largely by the comptroller. And as I said, it overrides certain provisions that are in these other statutes relating to tax increment financing. And this is all types of TIF financing, whether it's done under a redevelopment plan approved by Housing Authority, or TIF approved by an IDB, or there could be a community redevelopment plan under the CRA Act, which is not part of what we're focusing on here, since we're focusing on TIF. The Uniformity Act provides that base taxes and what they call dedicated taxes, that's the portion of property taxes that a taxing agency has designated to pay debt service on the taxing agency's debt. And Talia, I think that's maybe 8 or 9% of the budget is for dedicated taxes. Those taxes are allocated to the taxing agency, in this case Metro, and the increment above that may be allocated to the tax increment agency, although the taxing agency has the authority to retain more than the base and dedicated taxes. You're not obligated to transfer all of the increment to the tax increment agency. You can put a limit on what you want to do. And then once the eligible expenses have been funded in the tax increment, any remaining excess reverts to the taxing agency's general fund. That was not clear before, and so if you had a plan that said you may use the tax increment from this project for 20 years, if you paid it off in 15 years, they would sometimes find other uses for it. Sometimes those were very public uses. I think the Ascend Amphitheater and the baseball stadium both benefited from some of those funds. I think a lot of it probably from the AT&T building, which was a big project and generated a lot of tax increment, but you could no longer do that. The Act also imposes time limitations on allocations of tax increments. Those are no more than 20 years for a TIF that's done under the IDB statute, or the term of the redevelopment district in the case of a redevelopment TIF, which, as we said, cannot exceed 30 years, unless, they do leave an out, which I think was wise, unless both the comptroller and the Commissioner of Economic and Community Development, that's the state agency, sometimes abbreviated as ECD, if both the comptroller and the Commissioner of ECD approve it, and there's a standard set forth in statute, they have to find that it is, in quote, the best interest of the state. And that's the only place I think the phrase "but for" appears in any of these statutes. It's defined as meaning that the project would not have occurred but for the payment, or that an extended term is reasonably required for completion of the plan. And so I think it's good. But
say in the best interest of the state?
Best interest of the state. That's what it says in the.
Just want to make sure I heard that right.
In the plan.
The state.
Yeah. But I think it's probably good to put the 20-year and 30-year limits in there. I think it's also good that they left themselves an out, because it's very hard to predict what 10 years from now somebody's going to come in and people say, that is a fantastic idea, but it's going to take more than 30 years to do that, you know? And so if you can convince the comptroller and the Commissioner of ECD that you need that can be done. The Uniformity Act also authorizes an administrative fee of up to 5% of the incremental tax revenues for administrative expenses, and it requires that certain reports be filed with the tax increment agencies with the assessor of property for the county and the comptroller. And then there's another limitation on IDB TIFs. The money can only be used for public infrastructure costs unless, again, one of those best interest of the state determination is made in writing by the comptroller and the Commissioner of Economic and Community Development.
Could you give an example of
Public infrastructure. You know, there might be a project where the comptroller says that's not public infrastructure, but that's something I think does need to be done, and so I'm willing to sign off on a broader use of the money than would otherwise be permitted. And I will admit, this was the first time I've read all three of those statutes in the past. I sat down a weekend ago and read them all again. It's pretty scintillating stuff. But at least for your all's benefit and the benefit of the public, I have put it in English. I mean, this is capable of being read. Some of it's a little terse when you're reading the statute itself. I had not read the Inner City Redevelopment Act of 2003 before, but it appears to be pretty straightforward. Again, the legislature made a finding that inner city areas within certain municipalities have deteriorated, and so this statute authorizes municipalities to create one or more inner city redevelopment districts. I think we're all familiar with business improvement districts. We've got one downtown, we've got another one, I think, in the Gulch, where In essence, businesses agree to voluntarily pay additional taxes that will be used within that business development district. And so I know when our law firm was officing downtown, they passed the statute down there, and they came to us and said, we think it would be great if we had ambassadors who rode around on little segways and people that picked up trash and kept downtown clean and so forth. And we really don't have money in the regular metro budget to pay for that. But if you'd be willing to pay, a few cents more in tax every year, we would have enough money in this district to do that. And I think this is a very similar situation. It just recognizes there may be taxpayers in a given area who say, we are a lot more concerned about getting this area redeveloped, and we're going to be able to convince the Metro Council to authorize money to be spent down here. It's just another funding source. We can tax ourselves and keep the money within this district to improve it. The city is authorized to construct certain public improvements, parking facilities, and it also may delegate this authority to a district management corporation set up to manage the district. And so I think that's probably typically what you would do. You would find some group that's in the business of managing these type of things, and you say, we want you to manage this money. We're going to have $300,000, and we want you to have that as your budget and to cause some of these things to happen. And as we said, you can levy special assessments against all properties located within the inner city development district to cover the cost of and expenses of making those public improvements. And you may also borrow money and issue bonds to finance the improvements, because as we said again, all
Is this our CBID? Their CBID is falling under this statute?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. And the Gulch?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just another part of that same, another chapter of that same statute. So
Okay.
when I read it, I mean, like I say, I wasn't familiar with it before, and I don't know that anybody's ever done one. Maybe they have. But when I read it, I said, okay, this is just like a CBID. So, so I went through that really quickly, and so I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
I think some of my questions may come back to
with
you.
mine.
Because some of the things triggered things on where the local laws intersect
Right. Well,
with these, so I don't know how.
and we'll get to the local stuff here in a little bit. Just on the state law stuff, if you don't mind, I'm going to mention a couple things that I think are right, and if they're not right, let me know.
Sure.
Especially for people watching, it's important to understand that MDHA's role as a housing authority and what they can do for low-income housing is set up under a different state statute than what they can do for running redevelopment districts and tax increment financing.
Right.
And you already mentioned that economic redevelopment districts in their list of eligible uses, affordable housing is not one of the listed eligible uses for economic redevelopment districts.
That's right, but that's a little bit tricky. Let's make sure we understand. Eligible uses are what you could spend the money on. You can contribute TIF to a low-income housing project. It just has to be used for eligible expenses. And that's what's different with the TOD statute. It says the development of the housing itself can be an eligible expense.
Well, the thing I think is useful that I want to ask you about is, so TIF money in an economic redevelopment district can absolutely positively not be spent to pay for affordable housing, but clearly we've done projects that have got TIF and affordable housing. The Purcell administration did a bunch of them. And so the question that I'd just like you to visit is, so a project comes along and we see it got TIF and there is affordable housing in it. There is a widespread understanding that the TIF money was used to pay for the affordable housing.
Well, it could be used if the affordable housing project, let's say it's an apartment complex that has a garage component, it could be used to pay for the garage component.
Right.
So there are portions of the project that the money can be used for, but you have to find those eligible expenses. And it may be that somebody says, I couldn't have built this affordable housing project if I had to pay all the cost of a garage. Garage is very expensive. And so it would not be unusual to see redevelopment TIF money go into an affordable housing project as long as it's used for eligible expenses.
And typically parking or land acquisition
Right.
cost would be the ones that have been used.
Those will be the two big ones.
But for building the the second floor and the third floor and
No.
third floor, like TIF cannot be used for that.
It cannot be. Those are not eligible expenses in a redevelopment
Okay.
plan.
And then I want to make sure to touch on an economic redevelopment district, right?
Right.
I want to make sure to touch on every economic redevelopment district we have does TIF and uses the increment on a parcel by parcel basis and does not get the increment from the entire district. And the transit-oriented development was going to do an entire district.
Right.
As I understand it, economic redevelopment districts after '06 can either be parcel by parcel or entire districts. And I understand Knoxville has an economic redevelopment district where they get the increment from the entire district. But all our plans here in Nashville, economic redevelopment districts are parcel by parcel
Yeah,
TIF.
and Joe King can speak to that too, but I'm not aware of any that aren't done parcel by parcel in Davidson County.
I think they all are.
Is Knoxville unusual?
Well, I understand that perhaps Mr. Warren's firm set up the one or worked on the one in Knoxville.
I'm just
I
wondering,
don't
is
know
that,
if we
is
did or
that
not.
unusual? Or?
I understand that one of these law changes, either the '06 or '12, made it so you could do economic redevelopment that got the increment from the entire district.
Yeah,
We don't have any new plans since that law change. We've extended them, but we don't have any new plans. Knoxville has at least one, as I understand it, that was set up to get the increment for the whole district on an economic redevelopment
Yeah,
district.
I think that was a July 1, 2006 change. And you can still, if you adopt a plan today, you can take the increment for the entire district, but you don't have to. And so you could have a plan that says, I'm only going to take the increment on the Bell South building, you know? And so in essence, it still looks like a project by project arrangement. But you also have the other option to take the whole thing. And that, I think it would just be a project by project thing. You know, you might find one area. Well, Dell was done as a TIF. You know, I mean, you could see how somebody might say, let's use that incremental revenue that's going to be generated with the Dell operation out of Murfreesboro Road. to pay for it.
And the reason why I'm mentioning this is when we get to the idea having stages a couple months from now, I feel really, really, really strongly that the checks and balances on the math for a district from the city government perspective should be very different if you're, on the one hand, judging the value of the increment from a single parcel as opposed to 30 years worth of increment for an entire
Sure.
145 acre, for example, area. And I'd make the argument that the playbook we've got on the shelf for all existing TIF is built for the parcel by parcel, and some things ought to change, get reinvented, added onto, thought through, if we were going to ever pass an entire district increment.
Okay.
Can I follow up with a question, please? In terms of the law, can you speak to, does it have anything in there around changing agreements or altering existing agreements to plans?
The plan can be amended.
Okay, can you just let me know what the statute provides in terms of amendments?
It would basically be the same process that you went through to adopt the original plan. The MDHA board would have to propose an amendment, bring it to the council. One anomaly that I've noticed over the years, and maybe it's something that could be a recommendation, is sometimes the council will amend the plan to where it's different from what MDHA approved. And that just seems a little awkward to me in that the MDHA board approved one plan and the council approved a different plan. It's not like in Congress where you have a conference committee that goes back and reconciles things. And it might be that the best procedure, if the council wants to make a change, is to go back and advise the MDHA board, we will approve this plan with the following 5 changes, and let them resubmit the plan with those changes in it.
Well, and this is going to come up again when I do my presentation here in a couple minutes.
That's what I said, some of my may overlap.
So let's save it. Let's save it till then.
Who can initiate a change? Can any party initiate that change?
I think it would typically come from MDHA. I mean, it's their plan.
Well,
It may come up in yours.
I don't think, I'm not sure state law is clear about that.
I think that's a fair
Yeah,
statement.
my question's
There's
about the state.
there are a lot of things where we sort of had common law that have kind of filled in some of the gaps. I mean, that's the reason I made the point. The state statute says you must have these things in a redevelopment plan. So I think a redevelopment plan would not be legal if it didn't have those limited things in it. But you can have a lot of other things in it.
You would
too.
agree that if MDHA and the council approved a plan that said either MDHA or the council could propose an amendment so long as the other one signed off on it and there was a public hearing, that would
not violate the
fit-
statute.
Yeah.
That would not violate the statute.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. But it would be good, since the statute isn't very clear, it would be good to put in the plan.
Well, the plan, all the plans we have are crystal clear that MDHA is the only party that may initiate an amendment. And when we get to the recommendation stage, I'm going to suggest that either can initiate an amendment so long as the other one signs off and there's the requisite public hearing. Because right now it says MDHA is the only one that may initiate an amendment. Seems,
I'm going to save the rest of mine.
all right. Seems like we're going to go to the next agenda item, discussion of flow funds. I think that's supposed to be funds flow. That's my bad. Sorry.
Can I ask Mr. Kane to join me up here at the table?
Sure.
So the microphone can catch him?
Yeah. How about maybe Richard, you move that microphone closer to that one so you can.
Okay. At the committee's request was that Mr. Kane and I get together and to outline kind of a flow of funds document at a very high level, and each one of these boxes contain probably 20 other steps within them, but we sat in a room and tried to get this condensed to a single page so that we could walk through the process. And I think the thing that I want to mention before we get started are these boxes on the left. Brian, if you'll kind of like navigate for us, is that we thought it was important for everyone to kind of understand within this flow of funds who's kind of running the show here. And so you will, for instance, see that finance gets engaged really deep into the process down here. There's a lot that's happened before finance comes to the table. So we'll start at the top, which is the Metro Council has its approval, and then it goes to MDHA. And I'm going to hand this off to Joe so that he can walk you through these other boxes. And you just let me know when you want me to jump back in.
Thank you very much. I think it is important to reiterate what you just said, Councilman, is that both MDHA and Metro Council has to approve a redevelopment district. There is no way there can be tax increment financing authorized in a district without the local legislative body agreeing to that. So even if MDHA created a district, there's no way to get increment off of that without the council authorizing that. Once it is authorized, that is the cap. That is the most money that MDHA can borrow. The tax increment financing provision of the plans authorizes MDHA to borrow up to that certain amount that was approved. And so MDHA then works to administer the redevelopment plan that was approved. And so we accept TIF applications in that second bullet, and we would approve, we go through our approval process that I'll get into later as we're doing the approval process, enter into development agreements that put requirements upon the developer. And so that's the second step. After the authorization from council, then MDHA approves an individual loan. Then we go to a third-party lender, and we actually borrow the money from the third-party lender. Those funds are dispersed for the eligible uses that were just discussed, and they can only be dispersed for eligible uses. For instance, if we are not writing down the cost of the land, for instance, and that's the case in the Fifth and Broad TIF loan, that the land was not an eligible expense, so they don't get the money up front. And so the money that would then be dispersed as the developer actually incurred those costs. So if he's building the parking garage, once that part's done, he would be able to receive those funds, and we would then disperse those funds in accordance with the work being done.
That minimizes your risk then.
Yes, so that we know the work's being done, and we're not turning loose money, because the money can only be used for eligible expenses, so there's no way the money gets in front of the expenses. The future tax increment from the parcel is then pledged for the repayment with the developer guarantee that loan. Then it just falls into every other piece of property in the county. The trustee, we don't have the tax assessor. Obviously, the tax assessor goes out and assesses a piece of property. Trustee generates a tax bill for that, and trustee sends out the tax bill. The tax bill comes back, and those funds get receipted to the trustee. The trustee then generates a special report for MDHA of all the parcels of which MDHA is eligible to receive increment. And so once that is done, then, of course, Metro Finance, so this is when we'll turn back, Metro Finance, when after the trustee gets through with everything, Metro Finance then allocates the overall taxes for the entire county.
Yeah, that basically all, I mean, when the taxes are coming in, we're just using the property tax levy to determine the distribution back to the 6 budgeted funds on how total taxes are to be collected. It's not necessary, we're not going to allocate taxes based upon a parcel.
Correct.
Okay.
And so that's part of Metro's overall budgeting process. MDHA, meantime, with the data that the trustee has provided to us, actually does a calculation of the increment that is owed. And that is essentially, and again, I'm going into a little bit more detail, that's essentially the difference between the increased property taxes versus the base taxes. And then we submit an invoice to Metro Finance for that TIF. That bill is generally in the form of a letter invoice with a backup summary sheet of all of the parcels that have paid taxes. We do not collect increment on parcels that have not paid taxes. So if someone is, and obviously a lot of these projects include condominiums, which are individually owned, so they're not necessarily all paid by the February 28th, and some of them may be delinquent. There may be a supplement bill going into Metro when those other taxes are paid, but we do not request funds for taxes that have not yet been paid into Metro. At that time, then you have received the invoice.
Again, of course, I think you send that to us once a year.
Yes.
Yeah, with all the details. So we would remit those funds back to MDHA, and then the allocation of those, as you know, we allocate that from a budget perspective over those 6 budgeted funds. We allocate that back to those funds based on those budget percentages that we have established during budget prep. And the last bullet there speaks to the budget process. That budget is essentially set based upon historical and expected payments, and we had a discussion because those estimates could be better defined moving forward if we had some of the detailed information from MDHA regarding the actual parcels that were coming on board, because we've not had that level of detail available to us during the preparation phase. So that is something that, absolutely needs to be a recommendation that's coming out of this group to kind of refine our budget estimates in that regard. Okay, and then back to you.
They essentially wire transfer the funds over to MDHA. MDHA takes those funds, distributes out to the multiple lenders that we have that have the individual loans. There are multiple lenders on there. There are some that where a lender may have multiple loans, but there are definitely multiple lenders involved with that. We retain our administrative fee.
You've not been capping the 5%, though.
We have not. We have not been utilizing that because we submit into to the budget as part of the annual report that goes to Metro Council.
It's been like 3.5%, 3.4%.
Yes.
Okay. So we hope that this is enough detail because you asked us to keep it really high level on a single
Yeah.
piece of paper. So we can follow up on anything or any questions you may have.
So in that last point where you talk about distributing the increment to lenders, for properties that generate more increment than the size of the loan payments, do you guys pay ahead, or do you just make the amount of the loan payments and keep the extra increment in the house?
The actual loan documents are established that state that our payment is the total increment received. And so there is no amortization schedule per se.
And then it just gets applied to interest first and then principal?
And then principal with it. And so so if it is generating more than, say, a 15-year commercial note would pay, it will pay off in 12 years or something along those lines. And that we have experienced that quite a bit. And then prior to the revisions in 2016, 17, 16 that were done, when there was excess increment off of other parcels, we would take that inside the district to pay down those loans that were amortizing, no different than someone would in their family budget. If you have a loan that's at 7% interest and it's going to be paid off, let's go ahead and pay that off early, and we'll keep working with this one at 6%. So we did that on several occasions and were able to pay off some additional loans earlier than what was originally estimated.
This is great. When I get in conversations with people who don't know the process, there is not a widespread understanding of how it works, and especially the part about the property tax paid by the owner is the same. It's not a property tax break. They're getting other benefits out of it from being able to use it for part of their financing plan. But once the building's built, they're paying the regular amount of property taxes. All the action goes on in Metro. Metro collects the regular amount of property taxes that would be owed like any other building, but the increment part, the new taxes, then go to you guys to pay the loan.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Some of that confusion might be because of the different way pilots work. Payment in lieu of tax agreement. Sometimes the Industrial Development Board will take title to a piece of property and lease it back to the developer. And if that's done correctly, it can take it off the tax rolls. And sometimes they enter into an agreement with somebody that says, you'll pay half the taxes the first 5 years, and 3/4 the next 5, and then 100% after that. And when that arrangement runs out, they buy the property back for a nominal sum.
Well, I know we're going to hit it in another session, another day, but it might be helpful for people who watch. So if a developer once the building's built, is going to pay the regular amount of property taxes, could either one of you guys briefly describe, so what do they get out of why is it good for them if they're not getting their property taxes knocked down at all?
The most, what I feel is the most advantageous to the developer through a tax increment financing project versus a pilot is that we are able to essentially take the discounted cash flow of the future property taxes, bring it back to the present value, which is the amount of the TIF loan, and invest that into the construction phase of the project. And under a pilot, all that is reducing is their operating expenses going forward, and that may not necessarily be able to be capitalized back into the project.
I think it's well said.
The way, and I know this isn't exactly right, but the way I describe it, and tell me whether you guys think this is helpful or not, I look at it as, nobody would get TIF for their house, but if they were going to buy a $500,000, a $300,000 house, and you got to put 20% down, normally the owner's got to come up with $60,000 worth of equity. And the fact that they're getting a TIF loan reduces the amount of money they're going to have to come up with up front, so it's easier to finance the project. Instead of coming up with $60,000, they might have to come up if you could get TIF for a house, which you can't, you might have to come up with 55,000 instead of 60,000.
Right.
Is that a fair way to
Yes.
describe the way it
That's a
works?
fair way to describe it.
All right.
And in fact, not only do they not get a break, the development agreements even say they won't try and get their taxes lowered, because we want to make sure we've got that stream of revenue coming in to get that loan paid back. So.
All right. Anybody got comments or questions about this part?
Thank you so much, Terrell.
Glad to. All right. I think
Sometimes simple is harder than
I know.
It's like that old joke, sorry to write you such a long letter, but I didn't have time to write a short one.
Right.
All right, let's go to, I guess I'm next with the discussion of applicable local law. And so I got the PowerPoint that's up online, and just the overview on the next page. We've already talked about the state enabling legislation, and Richard mentioned that when MDHA and the council approve a plan, it has to check the boxes of what's required for a plan under state law. And so that's my second bullet point. MDHA proposes one, and the council has to approve it. And I thought the best way to show the interactions of the redevelopment plans themselves passed by the council, as well as the 2016 reform law that we passed, would be go through an example. And so I've chosen what I think is the second oldest one in the city, Rutledge Hill. It's been around since 1980. And then we'll talk about the TIF reform at the end. And so the next slide, you can see, passed in 1980. It was completely rewritten in 1986. It's not even fair to call that an amendment. They started from scratch, and it was a new plan. And then the 1986 plan was amended, has been amended multiple times since then. Twice, and it's not a typo, it was actually two different bills in 1997 amending it. Where is Rutledge Hill? That's basically the rolling Mill Hill area. It's the greenish area in the middle of the map. You can see it's bounded mostly by the river. That's I-40 toward the bottom of the map. That's the big wide area. Fifth Avenue, Fourth Avenue, where it touches on the yellow area, and up almost to Broadway, basically the back end of properties on Broadway. And so it includes where we're sitting now. So that's the current boundaries. Now, it would bore you guys to tears to have me show you the legal documents spanning back to 1980. And so I picked 9 characteristics to discuss what's changed over the course of the years since 1980. And those are listed there, and we'll go through them one at a time. First, blight. Richard mentioned that as a matter of state law, you just can't have an economic redevelopment district unless the development agency, MDHA, and the council declares that an area is blighted. From looking at the, next slide, please. If you look at the 1980 original plan, it called this area a slum and a blighted area. And especially if you compare the 80 plan to the 1986 plan, it's clear that the intent in 1980 was that there was substandard housing. There was a statistic that it called 67-point-some% of the housing in that area, quote, substandard. And it was clear that the idea of the plan in 1980 was largely about improving housing stock. And so it's the opposite of when we think about affordable housing. The objective was not affordable housing. The objective was it is a slum, horrible housing, substandard for 2/3 of the units. We need to lift the quality of the housing. And so 1986, I guess they decided to do away with the word slum, but there was a finding again of it being a blighted area. And then in 87, 91, 97, it just said we repeat the determinations and findings we made before, so that reaffirmed that there was still blight. 2005, again, used the word blight. In 13 and 14, none of those formulations were used. And so it is not a new finding of blight in 13 and 14. There was no reaffirmation of prior findings. I think it's fair to read between the lines that people were a little concerned about whether they could say with a straight face that that area is blighted in 2013 and 2014. That's my supposition. But the fact is, there hasn't been a finding of blight for the area since 2005. The next factor is how it discusses housing. I already mentioned that in 1980, it was clear between the statistics and the language used. If you read the whole thing, it's clear that the idea was to improve the housing. In 86, when it was completely rewritten, the way they talked about housing changed. Rather than improving substandard housing, it started talking about creating mixed-use development with residential as a significant part of it. That plan then till now has always talked pretty extensively about adding mixed-use residential to the area. In 87 through 2014, there's just been some changes. There isn't any reference to affordable housing. I think we know from the discussion of state law why there wouldn't be a suggestion about affordable housing in an economic redevelopment plan. Lots of talk about housing, lots of talk about mixed use, but no reference ever to affordable housing in any of the documents at all. Next factor is the length of the plan. And here we can see that in 1980, it was set up to be a 20-year plan to 2000. 6 years later, they stretched it out to 2010. I would suggest that reading between the lines, that's TIF related, why it was extended to be 24 years from 86. Then 2010 stuck for a couple of amendments. In 97, it got extended to 2025. I think that was expressly to accommodate the length of loans for TIF. And then in 05, it was extended to 2040, which is where it is now. And I personally think that as a city, we should consider the area was found blighted in 1980, and now we've got the plan going to 2040. Like, hopefully we can address blight in under 60 years.
60 years.
The amount of TIF. It's with Mayor Fulton passing away, he was mayor in 80 and 86 and 87, and as I was putting these slides together, I was really thinking about like his legacy in the city. And it's if you read the 80 plan on TIF, you would definitely get the feeling that it's an experiment trying to figure it out. And so it mentioned that TIF was allowed, but all this mechanism stuff that Joe's talked about and Richard's talked about, there was no mechanism created. There was no dollar amount set. It reads like they said, well, we might want to do TIF, so let's put it in the plan, but they never made a mechanism for it. And so there was no TIF done from 80 to 86. In 86, when it reads like, okay, now we got a better idea about how we would like this to work, and they redid the plan, they created $2.5 million as the cap. And then you can see that stayed in place for quite a while. And, for those of us who've been here a while, that part of downtown was not an early to develop part of town. So they managed to do with a $2.5 million cap for 11 years, probably because the market wasn't quite ready to do anything south of Broadway. 97, that's in time. That's when the Bredesen administration was thinking about what to do with the thermal plant. And they bumped TIF in this area south of Broadway to $15.5 million. In 05, it got bumped again to 35.5. I think that happens to be around when the Symphony Center was being built, and the Bridgestone had been built by then, so there was a definite look south of Broadway by then, and the number got bumped, and then it got bumped again to $60 million in 2014, when obviously south of Broadway has caught fire. Next, how much of the increment can be used to support TIF loans. This is how much of the increment goes to loans, how much of the increment gets to Metro. From 86 onward to 14, when TIF was being used in district. It's all the increment goes to pay TIF loans or administrative fees. Since 2016, when we passed a bill, now the debt service taxes are supposed to stay with Metro. Basically, the amount to pay Metro's long-term debt, and the rest goes to pay TIF loans and MDHA fees. What we can use tax increment funds for. Richard mentioned that state law lists a whole bunch of things that are eligible expenses, and then our plans can do either as coextensive with state law or more narrow than state law, but we can't make eligible uses above and beyond what state law allows. Now, this language in a slide or two, I think, is I think it's the next slide. It's important to see, I think, how it changed because in 2014 we substantially increased the scope of what was allowed you could use TIF for. But this is the language from up to 14, and then there was no replacement language. I mean, this language was removed, and it seems like it was a mistake. Next slide, 2014, and think with 2014, the context is 2 years earlier, the state had changed a law, and people wanted to build a baseball stadium. And so this language, I've underlined and put in red what is new and drawn a line through what was removed. And the most interesting language here is for this Rutledge Hill plan, parking garages were added. And the most important thing is that you can now use it for carrying out Rutledge Hill development plan or other adopted and approved redevelopment plans. And in the legislation that expanded so you could use tax increment from this district in other districts was also added to multiple other districts at the same time. And while I would argue no legal analysis to the council or words to the council ever talked about the impact of this, this was a legal prerequisite of being able to use money from certain redevelopment districts for where the baseball stadium is. Without that, there wouldn't have been even passing authority under the plan. Now, I have been in disagreement with some lawyers around town. I don't think the state law, even with this language, authorizes using TIF from one district in another district. And so I would make the argument that to the extent our plans even allow to use TIF from one increment from one district in another, I think that's beyond what state law authorizes. People who've taken the other side of that with me have said, well, state law is completely silent. But I think, you know, if state law allows that, then we should definitely figure out, we should engage in real estate speculation as a city. We should figure out where the next hot area in town is, buy all the real estate, and then take the increment and spread it around all over the place. There's no way, in my personal opinion, state law authorizes what it says there.
I haven't analyzed it as much as Bob has. So
Okay, you'll think about it.
I'll think about it.
Well, and I mean, just full disclosure, you know, Richard's firm has provided legal services for MDHA, perhaps around this language, and so I'm not sure we should put Richard on the spot
Well, I
about
didn't know that. I'm sorry.
language.
I was not personally involved in doing that legal work, which is why I say I haven't researched it. But my firm has done it.
But I would make the argument that if you look at Richard's memo about state law and you go read the state law, clearly there's nothing under state law that authorizes the idea of using increment from one district in another district. Our plans say it, and so we're in compliance with the plans when we do that. But as a policy matter, you know, you could ask whether that's the way you want to run the railroad. And the 2016 law we passed makes, for new loans, makes using increment outside the district against the city law,
Okay.
unless approved by the council.
You're talking about the Metro ordinance, not
Yeah.
the state statute.
Yeah.
Right.
I view this as an example of, over time, perhaps there's been a drift from the original intent about how this was done. Okay, the next slide is about how you can use the proceeds from the sales of land. 1980, when they were trying to fix dilapidated housing, there was language that expressly said if MDHA sells land that it owns in the redevelopment district, then they have to stick the proceeds back in to the district and basically use it as a revolving line of credit. So if they sold property in the district, they could take the money and buy other property in the district as long as it was for planned goals. And that makes a lot of sense if you're trying to address dilapidated housing. In 1986 and going forward, there's nothing specific in the plan that says what to do with the proceeds of the sale of real estate in the district. And state law this is the same, I mentioned the third bullet point, is silent, and the council has clearly approved at least land was sold, MDHA sold land in this district to use as the equity for Casey, Envision Casey. So clearly we've approved it. The 2016 law made it so you couldn't do it anymore without council approval. And this is a thing that I think ultimately we should have a recommendation of. Do we want districts, economic redevelopment districts, to be self-contained, so the profits or proceeds or revenue from the district are only used in the district to address the blight, or are they cash machines for elsewhere? Like, people could debate that. All right, next, TIF reporting requirements. This slide's pretty self-explanatory. There were none until 2016. Next slide about affordability requirements. I've talked about that throughout. That's not a goal of the plan. The 2016 reform, I've talked about the changes, and so this is really a summary. When drafting that 2016 bill, I was trying to get back to what I thought was the original intent in some things, and I was trying to add a couple of new features. And we've talked about each of these. But the baseball stadium feature, where like AT&T buildings, original TIF loans paid off, but now the increment is being used to finance the baseball stadium. That would be the default setting is you can't do that anymore without the council signing off on it. And the idea of selling MDHA property in one district to finance a project in another district, the default setting is you can't do that now without council approval. And then the new features are the reporting and the making sure to hold back the debt services taxes so we can pay the city can pay its bond debt without that getting tied up in increment. And that's all I got. Open to questions.
It's helpful. It's very helpful. You can, I want to just, will the chair recognize him? He looks like
Sure.
he wants to jump in here just for a moment.
I don't know if you want to go into it now or you want to wait until later, but having been at MDHA as long as I have, I do know a little bit more history. In 1980, with the land sales, Metro was also transferring property to MDHA. So that it could be redeveloped. That was Howe Park was an example of that. And I think that idea was that, okay, MDHA can keep this money that otherwise would have been Metro's as long as they were continuing to reinvest it. And then when the whole plan was rewritten in '86, there was no more Metro money coming to Metro from to MDHA from Metro. And in fact, the next property that I'm aware of that they actually transferred to MDHA was the General Hospital, and there's specific language in that says the proceeds come back to Metro government. So that's kind of been addressed as far as if Metro gives MDHA money, property, how that goes back. And that's what was addressed in 2016. It says, okay, MDHA can keep the proceeds out of Rolling Mill Hill now as long as it's going over to Envision Casey. The other one about reporting, obviously, there was no reporting requirements. We have been, in 2012, with the state comptroller passing the law, reporting was going to the state comptroller on a regular basis, and we were making reports available as needed and as requested. So I do want to just kind of make that little clarification point on there, that there were obviously some of this stuff was taking place, even though not necessarily outlined in the specific plan.
Well, and that's a good point, and let me just comment a little bit on that. Like MDHA gets audited every year, and it gets reported, and there's a board, and the meetings are public, and so there's a lot of transparency. You know, as we've talked about, and like anybody who ran for office in 2015 heard, and probably anybody who runs in 2019 has heard, there's still a feeling of people don't know how it works, and so I don't mean to suggest there's any sort of like bad ship operating or shenanigans. There has been an audit since 2012. There's been reporting to the state, and you know, part of I think the goal of getting the general public to feel more comfortable about it is the more information we share, the more transparent, and I definitely appreciate y'all's efforts in that direction over the last few years.
And I'd like to add that we are actually going in and adding some additional audit procedures for this year for their financial reporting to dig a little bit deeper into those processes. So we should be finalizing those agreed upon procedures.
Great.
Any day now.
And I cannot agree with you more. There aren't that many people, as the members of this committee are sitting here learning more and more every day, that it is a very complicated process. And MDHA, if Charles Robert Bone were here, he would be telling you that we welcome this, and we welcome everything that's going on. So,
all right. Unless there's any questions from me, we would move to discussion of local TIF practice.
I have.
So what is that?
I have a couple. If you do not have, do you have printouts? Did you have one? Oh, you need one.
I do. I brought my computer and I didn't have any tools. But was it a zero?
I understand that. You need one, Richard.
Thank you.
Brian, do you have one? Nice. Okay. This is going to go back a little bit, and it's going to duplicate some of the things that have already been spoken, and so I will try and go through it as quickly as we can. And some of it, I hope, will give a little bit more light to some of these things that we've already discussed. So I tried to just summarize as briefly as possible what TIF is, but by doing that, I wanted to go back a little bit in history and talk about it. One of the things that you mentioned, Councilman, was that we had this discussion about slums in our early programs and everything else. That's because redevelopment districts today came out of urban renewal. And urban renewal is the first rendition of this that was set up in the 1940s by the federal government. Tennessee and Nashville had one of the first ones in the country with the Capitol Hill Urban Renewal Plan. That, if you check on our maps, is still showing up as an existence. One of those, there was no tax increment in that. The urban renewal plans were completely funded by federal government. It did have a local match in there, but it was heavily funded by the federal government, and it was slum removal. And that's exactly what it did. Is it came through and it pretty much wiped out everything that was there and put in all new infrastructure and started all over again. And it's had a positive and negative reaction and consequences to all cities in which they take place, and Nashville's not immune to that. And so there was, the Fed stopped funding those back in the 70s, and that's when we turned and tried to come up with new plans. And MDHA no one had been doing this. It's not just different from the transit-oriented development districts. No one had been doing it, and so we were trying to learn. And Capitol Mall did the exact same thing that Rutledge Hill did. It had this community plan that didn't have any tax increment in it, and then we went back a few years later and adopted it and had learned a little bit more how to do that, and had gone in and made those changes into that where it's gone. Like I said, Capitol Mall, the districts was the first one that was officially created. In there, there was a Capitol Mall plan previously that was approved by council, then it became a redevelopment district, and it was attacking some of the worst places in downtown at the time that it was existing. As local folks know, downtown was not a place where you wanted to be. People kind of rolled up the sidewalks. This is when everybody had moved out to suburbia and all over the suburban malls. They kind of started creating and Nashville was a business district, and so and even those businesses were leaving, so they were created. On the next slide, I have a list of all the districts that were in place that MDHA has done. The Capitol Hill, like I will note, it was the first one. It was actually written without, it automatically renewed. It had an expiration date, but it automatically renews every 10 years unless 80% of the property owners in the area agree to amend it or change it. We actually changed it. It encompasses most of the state, but we did make a change into it. They did not want to eliminate it. What Capitol Hill has in it, which is some of the reasons why we've heard other redevelopment districts didn't want to terminate, is it has some restrictions in it that will not be there if the plan went away. The one in Capitol Hill is you cannot build a building around it that blocks the top of the Cordell Hall building. And so it is to preserve the view sheds of the state capitol. And so that was one that they did not want to eliminate. We also recently went into, about 3 years ago, went into 5 Points. That plan is the next one. It expires in 2020. And the community wanted to amend it, and we're like, we're pretty much done in here. Why don't we just terminate it? And the community said, no, we'd like the land use controls that are in here. We like your design controls in here. Neither Planning nor Historic Commission had gotten up to the point to be able to put additional overlays on it at that point in time, so they voted to keep it in that place, and so we did do that. Next is the redevelopment district map that everybody has seen that just goes over what I had shown. So going over to slide 6, how can I get tax increment financing? This is going to be a little bit of rehash of what y'all have already heard. Is you got to have the creation of a plan, and what is in a plan. I do want to emphasize on slide 7, I do want to emphasize that we are creating a plan, and this is a community plan that is done. We're identifying relationships to what the objectives of the overall city is in coming up with the plan and what those uses are and the requirements to do that. And Richard went into the relocation plan. So if anybody is displaced through this, that they would have another place to go. Relocation is predominantly a factor of eminent domain, which of course has fallen out of favor many years ago, and we've been able to get quite a bit done subsequent to the Kelo and the other information going and not using eminent domain. But it is a community plan. How do we get a plan? Lots of ways. People ask us we'd like you to take a look from elected officials, community leaders, property owners, developers may come up and say, hey, we think this would be a great place for a redevelopment district. And so if we have those conversations, my staff will go out, we'll take a look at it and see, hey, do we think that this is going to meet some of the minimum thresholds? Those minimum thresholds for these redevelopment districts are the blight. If it does meet those minimum thresholds and we want to continue with this, we will continue to meet with the community. We meet with the elected officials in the area. We bring in the planning department staff with these. We talk to everybody involved as to what the plan could be. With that, we incorporate their comments into the plan. We continue meeting until we get a consensus built with the community on there as to what could be done. And so then we have the text of the plan that is created. The blight definition. You are, it was subsequent to the Kilo case in New Jersey, yes, thank you, New London. New London. I knew it had a new in it. Where there was eminent domain utilized essentially to condemn properties that actually absolutely had no blight. What a lot of people who are not truly familiar with the Kilo case, the Kilo case upheld the right of the community to condemn those properties. That caused an uproar with the communities. They acted within what those rights were. And so after that, then there was this huge debate of saying we need to curtail that because those areas shouldn't have been blighted and we need to change what the definition of blight is. And so it got changed. And what is blight is pretty much limited in Nashville is pretty much to obsolescence at this point in time. We really don't have dilapidation. We have a codes department that goes out and because they changed the definition of dilapidation. So our codes, we really don't have dilapidated houses. Codes will tear the thing down before they get dilapidated, or they'll get boarded up or something along those lines before they hit the definition of dilapidated. Obsolescence, though, still hits. And it was hitting back in the time prior to the convention center built in South Nashville. People were going in Sobro area. People were going in there, the little one-story buildings. They were bulldozing them down. Those buildings were obsolete. It was more valuable to have that property a parking lot than it was to have it as a small warehouse for fixing. It was one of the copiers, and so it was still in there. It still hit on some of those thresholds.
You consider that blight?
Yes, the building was obsolete. It's obsolescence. The definition includes obsolescence, and so that's where we were going through. The structure on that building was obsolete, and so that's where those determinations were made.
Almost anything could fit that because you can build a better thing right behind it.
I mean, this hits the distinction about Joe's answering the question from a legal definition point of view, and you're asking the question more from a sort of a
layman's point of view.
Well, you do, and I'm glad you did, because it goes back. Unfortunately, it goes back to a bit of a legal standpoint. Is what you do is you have a definition of highest and best use, and that's done. Nobody really pays much attention to it because the only time anybody's getting an appraisal done on anything is on their own home, and their home automatically checks all the boxes as highest and best use. But if you had a commercial piece of property, someone would check the box and say, not only is this not the highest and best use, but these buildings are detrimental to the value of the property. Okay. And the buildings need to be removed
because I do
to
think
increase the value of the property.
There is community misunderstanding on this point from a layman's perspective.
Right, there is.
Well, and I remember a lot of the discussion before Bridgestone got built was you looked at that entire area south of Broadway and you had all of these surface parking lots, and it was killing our tax base. You know, I mean, when you look at what generates taxes, a 1 acre lot downtown with a 20-story building on it generates a lot of taxes.
Yes, it does.
People look at $1 million house and they say, boy, that $1 million house probably generates a lot of taxes. It really doesn't. You know, I mean, maybe sitting on 5 acres somewhere out in the suburbs, it's not generating very much taxes. And so I think we had mayors who looked at that whole area south of Broadway and said, we've got to redevelop this area. And boy, did we wind up succeeding.
Yes, we did. But I think that there needs to be a community discussion around that, just to make sure there's clarity.
I think that's where we move towards transit-oriented development. So, but I don't think, I will say, I think there is still a place for this. And we'll get to that. I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, the approval of a plan on slide 10, obviously, once the plan is done, it's taken out, it goes to MDHA Board of Commissioners. That is obviously in front of a public meetings. It goes to Metro Council. There is statutorily a public hearing held in front of Metro Council with that. I believe we publish more than the other public notices. We are required to publish 4 columns wide in the local paper a map of the area and the plan for 3 consecutive weeks prior to the public hearing. I believe that exceeds most rezonings that are done inside the city. And we give written notice. Now, we do not give, and this came up a little bit in Donaldson when we were doing the TOD out there, our requirements do not have a perimeter outside the boundary. And so when we were looking at Donaldson, we were notifying everybody inside the boundary. And I know the zoning goes outside the boundary. That was one of the difference. And then our plans also obviously go to committees. With that, it also goes to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission reviews our plans that are there. So the process, that's part of the process of approving the plan. Again, what is needed in TIF, this is where I have a little bit of differentiation between the traditional redevelopment districts, as I prefer to call them, traditional as opposed to economic, versus transit-oriented development districts. And a lot of it, and this is where I have the obsolescence.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, the state law calls them economic redevelopment districts, so why traditional rather than economic?
Just distinguishing it from the TOD, I think.
That and that it is, they have gone far in the state legislature to say it cannot be done solely for the purpose of increasing property taxes. And that's part of the definition. And I kind of got beat up a little bit down to the state legislature from time to time talking about, if you talk about economic development, they're like, no, we're not doing this for economic development purposes.
So
it's
notwithstanding the state law saying economic redevelopment district, from a practical point of view,
I've really historically looked at economic development being the result of what we do. We are carrying out the plan, and the plan is, and we're getting into some technicality here, but the plan is to prohibit or to try and prevent further disinvestment and to remove blight out of there. That is done through the economic development on there, and I may be one of the few people who try to argue that point more than anybody else, is that the economic development is actually a result of our successes in carrying out the plan.
All right. And I'm curious because I use the term because that's what the state law says.
A lot of people do. It is in the state law. It talks about economic development in there as well. Transitory development does not require the blight, as we talked about. We do not have one yet. I think we have an opportunity, and I think hopefully after this committee gets through and its recommendations are done, we'll be able to move forward with those. TIF assists the community in carrying out the adopted redevelopment plan. It does promote investment in a given area. New investment spurs additional economic development. Provides potential investors predictability through land use. Again, this is where, when we had wanted to lift them, people said, no, don't lift them. We want them to stay in there. And it does allow us to carry out some smart growth strategy depending on how that plan gets written and what gets incorporated into that plan with that. Pretty much trying to get on the backside of the background to it now, and then into the process of actually trying to get tax increment financing, which is, I know, what you asked me to do. So I apologize for the first 12 pages, but I did want to, I had the opportunity to try and bring those out and answer any questions associated with it. MDHA has an application. It's on, I believe it's on this Outlook, going back out so people can take a look at that. We do recommend pre-application meetings for people to come in and talk about their project, talk about what their plan is, and they'll submit their application to us. We review that application and ultimately make a recommendation to the executive department. How do we review that application? We look at, these are the factors that we look at on slide 13. Number one, is it consistent with the adopted plan? Again, we are working inside the plan. What are they doing? Is there a gap in financing? Is this cost of this project reasonable? Are they sitting there, are they building a gold-plated building in here when what we need is a lead building that is functionally beneficial to the community. The other one we look at is, it starts to get into the public benefit. What will the project do for the property next door? What will it do for the next block over? Is this going to be a positive impact on that? Is there a direct public benefit? Are we having a plaza put out front, are they building a park on there? Is there going to be public parking made available as part of this, and not everything reserved to the tenants only? Then we start getting into, all right, we have the TIF eligible expenses, and then how much will the property actually support? As mentioned, we are looking at the property to be able to repay itself on the incremental from that one property. From that point in time, it's either denied or approved in the approval process. We would then go and negotiate a development agreement. We would present that development agreement to our board and have a full discussion in front of both our committee and development committee and the board on that. The development agreement. Yes.
Do you guys? I don't know the answer to this question. Do you guys post agenda, or do you post the board package of materials?
We post the agenda.
Would you guys be opposed to posting the board materials?
That would be a question for my executive director. I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, it's all public.
Discussed at a public meeting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why it would not, but we only post the agenda at this point in time.
Sorry.
That's fine. The development agreement, I do want to touch on the development agreement, because this is where we get into a little bit of why did you give them TIF. We have a project description. We have a timeline for development. Some of this is required by state statute that you enter into this development agreement. We have financing requirements. We have DBE goals that are put into the development, and we get a final report on the project from the DBE goals. Those are requirements inside the development agreement. We also put in there any specifics into the development agreement as to what the public benefit is. Are we getting a public park out of it? Are we going to get public parking spaces out of it? Are we getting affordable housing out of it? Because we can contractually obligate that developer to provide affordable housing because he is wanting to take our tax increment funds to it. And so while you can't build the sticks and bricks of the affordable housing, you can go, as Richard was saying, you can go into land right now, and you can go to some of the off-site costs that are part of that are eligible, and you can go into infrastructure parking, get into it as part of that. So that all gets put into the development agreement. After we've approved the development agreement and committed on the TIF, TIF financing is secured from a third-party lender, with the future taxes off that property being pledged. And again, it is all taxes off of that property that are pledged. And the developer provides the backup on that. More documents are executed. Some of those are actually recorded in the courthouse. Associated with that, we report every time we do close a TIF loan, we report within 30 days to the state comptroller that the loan has been closed on that as part of that. We also have the final slide, and is the other portions of the reporting that we have to Metro, also annually to the state comptroller, that summarizes all of that into one piece for that. So the TIF obligations being met, for Metro retains all the properties from that. Metro also captures property taxes that take place on surrounding parcels. You mentioned about the Donaldson and the plan allowing that to take place on there. Actually, there was one redevelopment plan that was created subsequent to 2006. That was the Skyline redevelopment plan. We are not collecting increment off that whole district. We do have a TIF loan out there and are doing it one property at a time. So I wanted to make that clear. While we are able to do that, we are not. subsequent, actually even so subsequent, I guess, to you. I don't think your legislation was retroactive for prior plans, was it? So, but we are not.
It wasn't because of the plan amendment process.
Yeah. So for that purpose, I wanted to clarify your statement on that was one that was subsequent to 2006. So
One point that I didn't make about TIF loans that I think is important is there really is no risk to MDHA or the city. All they're committing is whatever TIF money we receive, we will pay to you, lender. And so if the money's not adequate to repay the loan, they can't come back on MDHA, they can't come back on the city.
On the parcel by parcel TIF.
On the parcel by parcel TIF, right, which is all we've done so far.
I would also point of clarification. We are not today. We do not have any increment pledge to any properties outside of the redevelopment district. The ballpark that is getting increment off of the Phillips Jackson. It is contained within Phillips Jackson on the parcels at the ballpark that are going to the ballpark. And then the Omni Hall of Fame is loan, which is our largest loan that we have, are restricted inside the Capitol Mall parcels.
Can we jump back? I want to go back to 13. And I think I want to, I'm trying to remember what you covered regarding state law and what needed to be in the plan. And then in terms of the data points that you are evaluating that are in the plan, didn't I hear something in some of your remarks about determining like the tax impact and things of that nature? I'm just wondering if this criteria that you have developed here in terms of evaluating the applications is complete, and whether or not we need to consider expanding that criteria for, I mean, if it's getting back to some of the elements that you mentioned in state law. Did I understand you correctly?
You did. There are 4 things. If you're going to have TIF, the plan has to include an estimate of the cost of the redevelopment project, sources of revenue to finance it, including the estimated tax increment, estimate of the amount and final maturity of the bonded indebtedness, and an estimate of the impact of the tax increment financing on all taxing agencies in which the redevelopment project is
Exactly.
located.
So in terms of these applications, I see that content is missing
It is.
here.
What Richard just recited to you are the conditions for the creation of the plan. So that is done at the time of the implementation of the plan. This review here that I'm talking about is as the money is going out under a loan. And so we are reviewing. So really the only financial implication, and this, I think this could be another place where we can work together, really the only financial implication that's being looked at from this point of view is what does this loan do to the total amount of money that was authorized to us when the plan was authorized.
Okay.
Because that plan authorized the expenditures of the funds, and that
That is
plan
helpful.
looked at the impact that it would have to the
When the
community.
plan is
That is
adopted, if it says there's $20 million here, it would look at what
That would have happened earlier.
that would have
Correct.
happened earlier.
So
And
it's
here
not,
the-
it's not happening at this point in time on a case-by-case basis, other than
Okay.
what is this doing to the total
Okay,
amount?
so when is that happening?
at the time the plan is proposed.
Okay.
should
Which
be in the
I
plan.
did not see discussed in the process.
No, it's part of the, it is part of, no, I did not list everything in here. What we do.
I just want to make sure that we've got, I'm not sure if that's happening, and I'm not sure exactly where it is in this process.
I think it's becoming clear that it should be a greater portion of it. The statute.
And more visible for when it does happen?
The statute requires, I think the statute really only requires us to notify you of it, which
you're gonna
doesn't
do
make
so
any
much
sense. I know,
better
which
than
makes no
that.
sense. Which
You're
makes no
gonna do
sense. But obviously, these plans are when they are being developed. We are obviously talking with we are talking with Metro, we are talking with finance with that, we are talking with the council members, we are talking with planning on that, who the planning obviously could check the impact that it would have with schools and the growth of the population and everything associated with that, and then the total amount of capacity that we're taking. So you
At
have
the end
not-
of
you
it,
were-
I'd
you
like
were- you
clarity, I'd like to have clarity
Yes.
on when all of that kind of
I think-
happens within the process by
Yeah,
the
and
time we get to.
It happens prior to the approval of the plan, and
Okay.
it obviously sounds like,
I'm interested in that.
yes.
Okay. My other question is on 15. I'm interested just because of everything that we're trying to do right now with minority and small businesses. Can you talk a little bit about these diversified business goals? Do you have some minimum standard or expectation going in, or do these folks just propose and you just determine whether or not you believe that to be acceptable? How does that work?
We have a goal of 20% DBE with our plans. We require the developer to submit their plan on how they plan to meet the 20% goal with that. We review that plan with that, and they are required to submit a final plan to us that shows how much they actually obtained with that on the goal. And
Do you follow up on that?
we
to
do.
Make sure
We
that's
have the reports in there. No, they are not. Obviously, they are not always met, and sometimes they exceed. I mean, because it's set up as a goal, but they are. As I do not have the data on that, but generally, I think we're doing a pretty good job
If
with
someone
what it
ends
is.
up at 5%, what happens?
It's a goal. It's not enforceable. I mean, we can't go back and say,
But I think if you had somebody at a track record of
Could
consistently
we-
not meeting it, that
Right.
Yes.
Could
be a
we- I mean,
factor.
what are our, I would just,
Would it make an impact if they were applying again?
yes,
Yes.
or something, just
I think
something
that's
to
a- I
make
think
sure
that's a-
that we are paying attention.
I think that's a real good point. I think that we ought to take a look at it. We have not taken a look at that. Because so many projects are so different.
But I will say in the years that I've been doing this, I think the contractors have gotten a lot better about figuring out how to meet those goals. I mean, you'll see them doing joint ventures with minority firms and things like that.
Do you report that out
Yes,
publicly?
let me make sure.
Yeah.
We have it. I know MDHA submits a report in on the DBE that we directly contract
I'm
for.
talking about just
I don't
for
know
theirs.
if we do this because we're not directly contracting for this work. I don't know if this is getting reported.
The board sees the reports?
No, not unless they ask for them.
I just think that this is
They come through
important
administratively.
information if these, that information be reported out.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's up to y'all, but, I mean, my view would be report it to the board and start getting the board materials online, and then it's out there.
I think
I know I
that's a
could
good recommendation.
get NESs pretty quickly offline, online rather.
Okay.
I had a question about 13. And I don't know, I have no idea whether this is comfortable or uncomfortable, but I'll ask it. I think that it would be useful for the general public to know the role, and I don't mean this mayor, I mean the mayor's office generally, pushing back to the beginning of TIF. My sense is that lots of TIF projects don't start with anything on 13. They start with a trip to the mayor's office. And whoever happens to reside there, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing, because you expect the mayor's office to be involved with large economic development. But I think one of the things that leads to the perception, generally, not necessarily about TIF, but about economic development generally, is this idea of it's an insiders club, it's mayor's friends, it's who you know. I think the part of how the mayor's office has fit into this process historically being completely unwritten, and you only know it if you know it, is something that is not helpful to the process. And we don't have to go into like the end of the world detail today, but I do think it's interesting. It would be good to have that be less unwritten and more formal. And my sense of it is like not well developed. I just have the sense that this is probably not actually where you start.
In my experience, one of two things usually happens, particularly if it's, say, an out-of-town developer who's coming here. They either go to the mayor's office and say, who do I talk to about economic development? And they probably get, in this administration, introduced to Matt Wilshire. Or they go to the planning department, and they start there, and they'll say, we really need some help with infrastructure. And they'll say, you need to go talk to MDHA. And so those are kind of the two routes that I see people follow. And I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of how that happens, but it's not written down anywhere. And it could be.
They could also go to a council person.
They could, and a lot of times that does happen. If you had a specific council district, they might come to you and say, I need to understand this process. And so they want you to tell them, who do I need to talk to, and how do I get your support? Do I need to go have a community meeting? What do I need to do?
Well, and so the other side of that is, and I pose this as a question, and maybe it varies from administration, but what is the likelihood of getting a TIF loan through this process if the mayor's office was opposed? And conversely, what's the likelihood of getting a TIF loan if it's anything other than the mayor's office is in favor? And I don't know the answers to those questions. My sense is that probably not going to get it if opposed. Maybe don't necessarily need active support, but definitely need not opposition. And that, again, goes in that's my feels like answer. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think every mayor that I've worked with has had certain economic goals. They've focused on Sobro, or they've focused on building a baseball stadium, they've focused on something else. And obviously, if you can align your project with one of those things that is of interest to this mayor, building the extension of 28th Avenue, I mean, every mayor identifies some things that they say, I want this to be my legacy, or when I get run for re-election in 2 years, I want to be able to point to, we've got this great project that I help. So obviously, if you align yourself with one of those goals, you've got a much better chance. If it's something that's nowhere close to anything that the mayor's office is interested in, there may well be indifferent to it, and that's not a helpful thing. It's better to have the mayor's office support than it is to not have it. But I don't think it's automatic either way. There are things that the mayor's office says, we'd like to see that done. We can't find enough eligible expenses, or we don't have enough money left in the district, or there are 3 other competing projects that seem to be more important. And so it's not a guarantee. I don't think that a project comes over with the mayor's office endorsement. Doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to get done.
It does not. Obviously, I would agree with just about everything you said. We have received referrals from everybody, including the councilman. And the Planning Commission does send people over there. We've actually had the codes department send people over to us because they're trying to figure out what they can build, and they get flagged and say, oh, this is a redevelopment district, you need to go talk to MDHA.
And occasionally Public Works, because somebody will go say, I really need these infrastructure things done, and they say, there's no money in our budget for that. You might go talk to MDHA and see if they can figure out some way to help you do it with TIF money.
And that can work with stormwater as well when it comes through. So, I mean, there's a broad spectrum, as well as we have the developer come up and knock on the door, not really sure where he got our name. I mean, because, we will say, when I am talking to him in part of the pre-application process, one of the things is, have you talked to your local council person? If it is a large-scale magnitude one that's going to have a significant impact, yeah, I mean, they'll ask and say, should I talk to someone out at the mayor's office or something like that? MDHA, as much as some of the media want to say that we operate in a vacuum, we do not operate in a vacuum.
I think actually your executive director says that.
We do not operate in a vacuum. From person who does the actual practice of it, is we are having those conversations with them. We are independent from Metro, but we are not isolated from Metro on that, and we do understand those needs. And most of our plans are written with the input that comes out of the administration. Most of our TIF loans that you're seeing today that we have came out of requests to support certain projects out of the administration. Those being, a lot of that being the convention center quality hotels that we have. That was part of the Music City Center. That was part of the local administration. That was even part of the process that council had authorized trying to get the convention center originally
Yeah,
financed.
two good examples are, obviously, when Mayor Dean came into office and decided he was going to build a Music City Center, I actually represented one of the developers who was trying to figure out how to help get a hotel built down there. None of the four who originally proposed could figure out how to get it financed. And then the Omni developer contacted the city and said, I can finance this, but I'm going to need some incentives. And so, and if you talk to the Convention Visitors Bureau, they said we could not get the quality conventions we want without full-service hotels. And it often takes TIF to build a full-service hotel. You build a limited-service hotel. Full-service hotel creates a lot more jobs, and it obviously attracts a different kind of convention. I was on the Chamber of Commerce intercity visit to Portland, and they built a nice, shiny new convention center. Couldn't figure out how to get a hotel built by it, and they said it's just killed us. You know, they said we've got hotels on the other side of the river, but you just can't get these planners to think that's a good idea.
We're starting to run out of time today, and we're not going to get all the answers. But one thing I would like us to consider is, what you guys just described is meetings and conversations of individuals from different departments that don't trigger open meetings laws, which is fine. But there's necessarily, I would argue, in the public reception, part of this, how do you really get it done? Like, how do you, like, there's more to it than the application process. How do you really get it done? Coming up with something to address that being opaque to the public might help in the long run.
I have a few follow-up questions that I think
Sure.
I can do quickly.
Yeah.
And part of this probably results from me never having attended one of the MDHA board meetings, so I'm sorry if these are basic questions, but I'm guessing some people might watch us later probably haven't either. Are all applications public records?
They are.
Okay. And then for applications that are deemed by the urban development staff to, not have crossed the bar being sufficient, are those determinations written reports that are ever made public? Is that part of the packet when it goes? Well, so two questions. One, do applications that are deemed ineligible or not sufficient, or however you want to put that, they do not go to the board for action, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that determination that's made by staff, is there a record of that anywhere?
There is a record. We respond to the application, and there would be a denial of your application, and there would be a reason written down with that.
Okay. And then for applications that move ahead to the approval process, and this may get, I guess, to some of Tanya's questions, is there a staff report that is given to the board when they consider approval?
What is given to the board is, to the full board, is the actual development agreement.
Okay.
That outlines the project, outlines the plans, outlines the pledge of the tax increment fund. So what the board is seeing is the actual written agreement that we're requesting authorization to enter into.
But not the analysis.
If they request the analysis, we'll provide them the analysis, but it's not attached.
Okay. So if I had questions about whether or not something provided sufficient public benefit to justify TIF, that would be discussed in the board meeting as part of the development agreement if I was on the board,
Yes.
say, and I had that question?
Yes.
Okay.
We also have, the board also has, and I think you have it on the links, a list of TIF priorities of what type of projects that
board
would be
considers.
most inviting to us and most interested to us. And so that's one of the ones. I don't think it's in here. I know you have it on the.
It's actually done by district, right?
Yeah, and we have broken, we kind of generalized them into types of districts, but yes, that is broken down as to what's needed inside those districts. Historic preservation has always been a high one for us if you are doing something to help restore an historic structure. Also, if you're trying to do anything with affordable housing, in light of where we are has been. And then we have worked with parks and open space and well,
Okay.
the others like.
And then a couple questions about establishing and actually also allowing a plan to expire. So how often is a new plan requested, would you say? I mean, how many times do you guys get those?
Fairly often. actually.
Request.
Like one per month?
No. You know, I will say there's an increase every time there's an election because people have determined, have found the benefit of what these districts can do. There has not been requests recently since the transit-oriented development came out because we have always been having this problem. Our answer has been, we can't blight it. We can't blight the area. They would want us to come out there, and the blight is a major problem. The last two districts that we put in place are Bordeaux, which included the old landfill, and it included all of our Casey housing, which has been constructed since the 40s and is way overcrowded and needs to be redeveloped in there. And those were the two that we put into place, the economic redevelopment districts that went into place that were more than that. And so when people would come to us, we would say, you're going to have to wait until this transit-oriented development district comes along because that area is not going to meet the blight threshold. It's very rare. And we did, prior to TOD being a possibility, which was, I guess, in 2016 is probably when we started writing the legislation for TOD, we would get more requests, and it's like, it's not going to make it, it's not going to make it.
So how many per, I mean, if you're just have to guesstimate, how many per year would you say?
Prior to the TOD, I'd say I'd get probably one a quarter.
One a quarter, okay. And then, since planning staff is involved, is there, I assume one of the things they go through is some kind of determination about whether or not this would conform with the principles of Nashville Next.
Correct.
And so, how is that done? Is that through meetings? Is that some kind of analysis and report that's done?
Yes, we both through meetings and through, you know, and we send them the plan. We're looking at their plan and seeing how this stuff lines up. We've actually gotten to the point, if they don't line up, all right, which one needs to change? And they're like, well, you're out there today doing public meetings with these folks. We haven't been out there in 8 years, you know, because we haven't updated our plan. And so yours is making more sense. We'll make it. We'll amend, you know, the Nashville Next plan to be able to be in compliance with this. But we work on driving those together so that our plan and Metro's plan is the same.
Okay, and then final question about this, and then I got one more thing I want to talk about that I think is worth going a couple minutes over, if that's okay. You mentioned for plans that are going to expire, districts that are going to expire, I guess. You know, you approaching property owners or whatever stakeholders and saying, you know, this is going to expire, and they said, well, no, let's keep it in place because we are the land use controls make sense, and those are preferences we still have. How is that done? Is there some sort of public hearing to say we are going to extend the period? Or how does that work?
Well, the one that I was specifically talking about was 5 Points, and there was a request to go in and take a look at the land uses because the land uses were being restrictive. They wanted to change some of the land uses, and so we went to the community. We took a look at it, and there were some legitimate reasons. 5 Points had changed significantly in between the time we initiated the plan or the time we had done the last amendment. And we said, all right, this makes sense, and we went into it and started talking to the community about it, and we're like, hey, we're essentially done in this district, and we don't have any debt left in this district because the debt had been paid out on all the TIF loans we had in that redevelopment district. We can just terminate this plan, but any amendment to the plan is an amendment to the plan. So even if we went in and say, we're going to end this 2 years early, it would be a plan amendment that would go through the public process, the public hearing, the advertising, and everything else like that. So if there were going to be a change to the plan. But no, if something is just approaching the end, we don't go out and say, hey, do you want to renew it? Unless we're hearing from
Right,
the
if there was a
community that
request,
says,
right.
hey, can we renew this? Can we do something?
Okay. And then last thing I want to talk about, and you've said this, and I think it's probably clear to everybody sitting at the table, but I don't think it's clear to other people who aren't in the weeds on this stuff, because this has been asked to me before, and I'm not sure I have it clear. Understanding that TIF loans are conduit debt, and you guys are involving a third party, and it's not on MDHA's books. Let me just kind of pose a hypothetical example, and then you can tell me how this is addressed right through the debt
I hope so.
process. So let's say somebody comes to you, a TIF project is approved, you guys go out for third-party financing. And then let's say that the developer goes bankrupt. And, or the project doesn't produce the increment necessary to pay off, to pay the debt service. What happens?
The loan documents themselves with the lender are very specific, and it says all you're going to get is the increment that is generated from this property, or the pledged properties if there are multiple that are in there. If they're not generating that increment, you don't get any money.
So the lender has no recourse.
There is no recourse to MDHA. Absolutely none to the city.
It's non-recourse against, and that's a technical legal term that means can't come after the city, can't come after MDHA. They always get a guarantee from the developer.
And I know we had at least one. Where
So
the
they go
developer
after their
did go
guarantee.
bankrupt, and the lender kept writing letters saying, I'm not getting my money, and we said, all you're going to get is the tax income.
Yeah, there is no money to get.
There is no money.
We do to attempt to prevent that. We do get kind of noted in on developer on completion guarantees that a lender would have, so that the project would be completed, so that something would not go belly up halfway through construction and our money went in on the front end to write down the TIF loan. To write down the value of the land. So we want completion guarantees done with that. We have put requirements in there that all the construction financing is in place before we would close the TIF loan as well, so that we know that there will be a project that will be completed at the end of the day to minimize anything like you just said from happening.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
And the good news is it's been very rare.
Yeah, I think there's only one or two where the guarantor has ever had to be addressed.
Yeah. Well, in the first year, in the first couple of years, sometimes it happens, but generally then the property values. Once the building has stabilization, it's good.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for all that. We have a discussion of syllabus and for future meetings on here, and that's Brian.
So I saved the draft in the final folder versus the dated folder, just because it's going to apply to all of the meetings, and I know we're running out of time, so I don't know.
I mean, we should at least figure out what we're doing for the next one.
Yeah. But I thought so. Last time we were here, we discussed kind of how we would lay out the topics and how we would sort of structure each session. And so we solicited questions from the committee members, two submitted questions, and so I took a look at those, and those also are posted in this folder, and tried to sort of sequence topics here that I thought would sort of the title of the topic would make sense to the public, and it would also probably encompass the questions that were submitted. So looking ahead to next meeting, there's a lot of financial data in the folder that's been submitted. I thought that, and then there's this kind of general discussion about, whether or not these deals, quote unquote, pay for themselves. And so I thought it might be worth a session to look at the economic and fiscal impacts of projects or of TIF in Nashville. So I propose that for next time, kind of looking down the schedule here, assuming we could continue to meet roughly twice a month. I thought dedicating a session to this question of why TIF is necessary, getting the perspective from the private sector. So, and you could have a lender in, you could have a developer who's gone through the process, kind of however we wanted to do that, but to hear directly from people why this is necessary. Current and potential impacts of TIF on housing affordability. There's this question about TIF as a vehicle primarily to address housing affordability, and whether or not that should be an important emphasis of how we think about TIF here. What is transit-oriented development, and what role should TIF have? And then in February, this question of transparency, and that's it's sort of a loaded word, but that's part of the point here. What does it mean, and how would we evaluate TIF in Nashville? And I thought, as with this discussion about, board documentation and all this comes up, I think this is, that session we could kind of take a deeper dive on all aspects of this, whether it's, front-end analysis of proposed or applications or proposed projects, or, how we conduct business in general. And then looking ahead to March, I know that, Bob, you'd mentioned kind of wanting to reserve time toward the end of this timeline for some deliberation, and that's when I think we would kind of discuss, all of our suggestions for improvements, and then reserve April for writing. And then I guess, we could call additional meetings if needed. There would have to be kind of a final meeting, I guess, at some point, probably, to take action on whatever recommendations we wanted to do. But I figured we could probably sort that out later.
Since we are already over, my suggestion is that unless somebody feels really strongly that we should run with that as a game plan. And I think we should try to do 3 things quickly before we go. One is at least figure out when the first January meeting is going to be, so we can get it on our calendars. 2 is definitely figure out who we want to try to talk to for December 20, and then I think we should at least talk a little bit for a few seconds about the kind of people we'd want to talk to for the first meeting in January, and we could plan to try to stay a couple of meetings ahead with some more details. And so let's start with the December 20. No idea is a bad idea. Who are we thinking could be somebody we want to hear from for that topic for December 20? Did you have somebody in mind when you wrote that?
Well, Tally, you guys have put together a lot of information.
What's in the folder? Is there a folder with that, with materials under that subject?
No, not yet. There was something you had submitted that I wasn't sure if we were going to do this today or not. Yeah, that.
That won't take an entire meeting, but it is worth a walkthrough for the next meeting. This is just a historical, 20-year history of just the TIF, as well as property tax history, just for comparison purposes, something that I had asked my team to put together. So I'd be happy to walk through that document.
And then, get Matt in here?
I could.
With the time limit?
I think Matt needs to come in.
I don't think that point needs any discussion from I'm not sure he would be able to. I was thinking more somebody who could do kind of a deep dive on one particular project, and maybe pick one that's old enough to be able to do some kind of ex post analysis of what the impacts have been.
When I was looking at the Donaldson TOD during the summer, I was looking at old, it's all online, the property tax revenue stuff for the AT&T building property. We could...
Something like that,
we could pick some that are late 80s, early 90s vintage, in Capitol Mall somewhere I think it's interesting. When I was doing it, I was looking at, I was specifically looking at percentage increases. I don't want to talk myself in this job. I got a lot of stuff to do. But I was looking at percentage increases of the parcel, and then a block away, full block away, whether the percentage increase of properties that were immediately adjacent or a few blocks away, like Cummins Station isn't, like, I think there's some money in Cummins Station. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Anyway, it's interesting. It is interesting to explore this idea about whether historically adjoining properties have had their property taxes, therefore value, go up as much as the parcels that are redeveloped. I did sort of just talk myself into doing that, didn't I?
I would second that, yeah.
All right.
But yes, I can invite Matt too to give his perspective if the committee would like that.
We did do I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
We did do an analysis of looking at district by district. We didn't do parcel by parcel.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I'd be glad to share with you what that was.
That'd be great if you could do
on
that.
a district-wide basis. Obviously, that's picking up lots of new construction
Yeah.
along with the stable ones, but we did look at it from a district-by-district basis.
Well, why don't we, because that is going to be 5 days before the holiday, and like I'm not sure how much attention span I'm going to have. Then if Talia goes through her spreadsheet, and Joe will send me the data he just mentioned, and I'll put something together just to look at what's happened with some individual parcels. I think that's a good idea. And then maybe that'll indicate further analysis that we can ask somebody to get for us. I think that's probably enough for that meeting.
For the holiday.
Yeah. All right. January. I liked your suggestion of, I think we should get a lender who's made loans, and I personally would like them to bring their underwriter person or at least have talk to their underwriting person to really get in the weeds on what they look at. And maybe, I don't know, you can probably.
I can find somebody to do that.
And then I think it would be interesting to have a developer who's used TIF, and then I know there's a few developers floating around that would have liked to have gotten it at some point and didn't really come together for them. And I know they've got a perspective to share about that. And I mean, I think that would fill our time plenty for that one. So, Richard, you're going to work on getting a lender. Joe, do you want to suggest a developer that's used TIF that would? Okay. And
You'll find the.
I'll email. I'll give you a call about the not. I've got somebody in mind. I've got somebody in mind who would be nuanced and articulate, not just mad.
That would be helpful.
But I would have to talk to that person first. All right, so let's see if we can at least get January dates that are good for those of us who are here. Because it's going to be January in a hurry here.
And I mentioned I will not be here on December 20th.
Yeah. So we're meeting on the 20th. I don't know. I mean,
January 4th.
is this Friday at 1? Not horrible.
It's fine.
All right. So.
Does that work?
Can we do it at 2?
I don't think we.
Friday the 4th at 2. Can we do that?
You guys. Let's. Yeah. Okay. Fine. The 4th.
Well, you got council's right.
Yeah, council's the day before. I'd rather do it the 11th and 25th
Oh, okay,
if
you're
we
going
can.
to skip that week. Okay, it's a short week anyway.
Yeah.
I'm good. For
Well, I'm out of town on the 25th.
So you're thinking the 11th?
11th and I know it's not the Friday, but I'm going to be out of town on the 25th. Wednesday the 23rd.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
And Talia is asking for 2, not 1.
No, that would have been if you were doing the 4th.
Oh, okay. So we're going to
We're
stick.
good.
We're going to stick with 1 to 3
Okay.
p.m. January 11, January 23, 1 to 3 p.m. This room seems like it's working.
And I'll book the room. I'll get the room booked.
All right, I got a new business item on here. Anybody got new business? All right, then I guess that's a wrap.
We doing public comment?
Oh,
So I got one email in the email box.
okay. Go ahead, tell us. Let's talk about that.
So she's here. I mean, I can read this on your behalf, or if you would like. Okay. So it says, I'm a bit confused by the report we were looking at today. I was going over the taxes paid at several properties, and they did not match the tax records on the books. As an example, 415 Church Street, number 1301. According to the report dated December 5th, 2016, they paid $4,411.63. Yet when I go to the tax rolls, they actually paid $4,887.54. I tried to figure out the difference using the numbers provided, but I could not get the numbers to work. What am I missing here?
It's you.
Most likely what you're looking at is the Business Improvement District. There is a separate tax rate for the Business Improvement District, and MDHA does not count that in the taxes. So the number that you would see on the report is less that debt that was going to the Business Improvement District. And that is probably the dollars that are the difference.
And we talked about that a little bit, but it was quickly and a little disjointed. We've got a downtown business improvement district where the downtown landowners have agreed to get charged slightly more property tax to pay for the folks you see going around downtown giving directions and cleaning stuff up.
Got that, but this is 415 Church, it's a residential, isn't it?
Yes, but it's inside the district.
It's inside.
It gets all properties inside the district. On their tax bill, there would be a line item that says Central Business Improvement District.
Well, I printed out there, I don't see it. Okay, I'll look for it again.
All right, anybody else got anything? Thanks a lot, everybody. Appreciate all the hard work.
Yeah, I learned a lot, gentlemen.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.